Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You have tuned into the Rebel News live stream panel discussion on this, a Friday, March 13th, 2026. I'm David Menzies, and I'm delighted to be joined by my co-host in beautiful British Columbia, all the way from Vancouver, and that would be Drea Humphrey. Hey, Drea, let's get the formalities of the day out of the way. Are you superstitious? It is a Friday the 13th. Does that make you modify your behavior in any fashion?
Well, when you say it like that, no, not really. I'm not really superstitious. What stood out to me is I can't believe it's mid-March. And I feel like, as far as in the world of news goes, everything has just been so accelerated in 2026. It's just been so fast. So that's really what came to mind when I heard that date. But I'm happy to be here on the show as usual for Fridays, where we have our panel. And my favorite part, as I always say, is the fact that people can join these live streams. Nothing scripted, it's all off the cuff. And you can support us while leaving a comment. So if you're on YouTube, you can leave a super chat, which weighs into the show, breaks some news if you're seeing something we can't in the moment, or just tells us, we need to do a better job, whatever it is. If you donate $5 or more, we thank you for that and make it part of the show. And if you are watching after the live, you can do the same by leaving a super thanks. And if you're watching on Rumble, whom we have a great relationship with because they did not censor us like YouTube has in so many ways, then you can leave a Rumble rant. So hope to hear from some of you guys too.
Fantastic. And also, folks, joining us as our guest for the first half hour of the show, we have Josh Udall of the always entertaining The Elevate Report, and that's one of those fancy spellings with the number 8 as opposed to ATE. Josh, how you doing? And tell me, Friday the 13th, does this make you want to get out of bed, or is it just silly superstition in your book?
Well, over here on the Elevate Report, and actually I'll say we actually grew up. We actually dropped the 8, and now it's the proper spelling, so I'll tell you that much. Man, we're growing up in the world over here. But I'll say this. One thing, way we play our Fridays, it doesn't matter if it's Friday the 13th or Friday the 16th. All we care is that Friday is always a feel-good Friday, and that's what we're going to bring today.
100%. I have a friend, and he told me in order to ward off the Friday the 13th vibes, clutch a lucky rabbit's foot. And I went, lucky? How did that work out for the rabbit? I mean, the rest of the body. So I'm not buying into that anyways. And speaking of bad luck, we have Prime Minister Mark Carney making another incredible statement. Evidently, he says he's not the only spokesperson for the Canadian government. I thought in corporate terms, he is the CEO, but what do I know? Why don't we throw to the video and try to make sense of it all on the other side?
Well, I'm not the only spokesperson for the government, but I'll just confirm that Canadian forces the members of the Canadian forces are all safe and sound. I reinforce, as I said in French, what you know, which is that we are not engaged in these actions of the U.S. and Israel. We're not engaged in offensive actions, and we will not be engaged in those actions. Well,
Well, Josh, let's go to you. I guess it's kind of good in a way that Mark Carney is recusing himself as the lead spokesman for Canada, because when the Iran war broke out more than a week ago, in 5 days, he had 5 different policy positions. So right now he says, we're not involved and we're not going to get involved, to which I have to say, let's check it out in about 10 or 15 minutes. What do you make about this? And what do you make about his comment when he was pressed on why Canadians were not informed that Iran had indeed bombed a Canadian military base in the Middle East?
Well, a couple things. And so obviously the one thing is we see right off the top is it really stinks as Canadians when your prime minister, who's supposed to be the guy, is saying, wasn't me. I was like, okay, Shaggy, got it. But I think the other thing too we have to really think about as well, and the thing that's a little more serious to me, especially living in Halifax, very close to the Navy here, a lot of direct connections that are working in the Navy or in military around the country, is the families. How would you feel the family of one of these individuals who's working that base? You just heard about this.
Yes.
And then as well, how do you feel as a member of a military family when your prime minister shifts his position 5 different times on one of the biggest conflicts in our recent times?
Yes.
That's what I'm thinking about right now. And I would be, quite frankly, disgusted. And it shows the lack of leadership and the lack of care. I'm sorry, I forgot. What was it? During the election, it was supposed to be, I'm the guy who can handle it. I can handle Donald Trump. I'm the guy you hire in a crisis. Well, there's a lot of crises happening these days, and your first emotion is, wasn't me. What are we doing here? And I think that's the first thing that comes to mind when I see this, and it shows a lack of leadership and a lack of maturity for a guy who's well into his 60s at this point in time.
You know, that's a great point, Josh. And Drea, I think Josh does speak to the bigger issue. I think, you know, Carney isn't a political animal. He comes from the corporate boardroom. I think he's used to him being the CEO where he's never questioned, never has any blowback, because that's the way it rolls, I'm sure, in the corporate edifices of Brookfield Asset Management. But I'll tell you on another angle, Drea, what bothers me, we had no idea that this had happened. And this is in the backdrop of the federal government in Ottawa tightening the freedom of information laws. And in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford doing exactly the same thing. There are information we can get now that we won't be able to get in the future. And we didn't even know about this major incident. I just think it's going to get worse, the secrecy.
Both of you are hitting very important parts of this on the nail. My first thought was, I can't believe MPs are crossing the floor for this guy. It's just, we become so embarrassing. But yeah, he's not the only leader, he's the leader. And we're not talking 1, 2, 3 days, we're talking 11 days. That is very scary for all Canadians, that this is the guy who is running our ship there. But you're right, when you mention the lack of transparency, that's what we've been seeing with the Liberals for, you know, a decade now, but it's getting worse and worse. And I should add, British Columbia is having how coincidentally the exact same thing going on, where we're trying to tighten up our freedom of information stuff too. So clearly the public are being pushed and pushed and pushed away from the truth. And in this case, he's just completely deflecting on something so serious as our military being bombed by another country.
Great point, Drea. And he's acting this way with a minority government. Imagine these cats if and when they get their majority. Why don't we go to his conservative counterpart, Pierre Poilievre? Because, you know, you remember Mark Carney during the election, he posed himself as the guy, the adult in the room. He would deal with Trump. And he also said words like, judge me on affordability, judge me on the cost of a liter of gas, judge me on the cost of your groceries at the supermarket. And, well, everything's going up, up, up. And as Mr. Poilievre notes, what's the culprit? Turns out it's Iran. Unbelievable. Check it out.
Spring housing report is out, Mr. Speaker, and the headlines are concerning. Here it is. Condo sales have collapsed, inventory of all types of housing has surged, and financial conditions have worsened for homebuyers. But here's the most concerning thing about that report. It says that Canadians are delaying starting families because of housing unaffordability, delaying marriage, delaying children, the very foundations of our society, because they can't afford a home. We've offered one positive solution: remove the GST on new homes for all Canadians. Will the Minister commit to doing that today?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's no surprise that Canadians are challenged with buying homes right now when there's a war in the Middle East. There's no surprise, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Okay. The member may continue. Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, In the first 100 days of Build Canada Homes, we've secured agreements with Nova Scotia, with BC, with Nunavut. We're delivering thousands. We're up to 9,000 homes that are being delivered through Build Canada Homes for Canadians. And we're just getting started, Mr. Speaker. We passed the Build Canada Homes Act in this House in the days ahead. We can supercharge the construction of affordable housing, and that's what Canadians need.
The honourable member for York Durham.
Well, Mr. Speaker, an excuse for every problem, but this is a new one. The war in Iran is the cause of our housing crisis. Wow. I mean, I don't know how you figure that, square that circle, Mr. Speaker. And he boasts about 9,000 new homes. He promised 500,000 new homes. That's not even 2% of his target. And guess what? CMHC says only 259,000 were built last year. Only half of the target again. So at the rate that the minister complacently brags about, we'll never hit the target. So will he take our idea and remove GST on all new homes for Canadians?
Of course, that was not Pierre Poilievre, unless he's had extensive work done. That was Jacob Mantle. But the points resound. Let me go to you first, Drea, because Gregor hails from your neck of the woods, and I think Vancouver, they're either in a two-way tie or they're ahead in a photo finish in terms of the highest average housing prices. And this guy's the Ministry of the Minister of Housing. Isn't that kind of like putting the guy who was the captain of the Titanic in charge of the Navy?
Absolutely. And I believe we are ahead. We're ahead of Toronto as far as having some of the most expensive places to live here, in particular, of course, in Vancouver. Again, I point to the decade of being under the rule of the Liberals. That would be by far the most common thread, the common denominator in this decline of affordability that's happened out here for many reasons. We had a lot of foreign people buying up homes and driving up the prices for everything. We even had a lot of empty homes for a long period of time, which was making the rent go up, which is still up. But, you know, we see this with the Liberals. I think what we just saw was it happened too fast. I mean, like, this war just started and already that's the reason we can't afford homes. What happened to pointing at Trump for everything? I guess they're moving a little bit away from that. And let's not talk about how much money we've spent on the Ukraine war too. So it's just the one thing I see about that is perhaps maybe even some of the Liberals will look at that and go, what the heck? You know, because it was said a little too soon.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, Josh, what Drea is saying. It's no longer just big bad orange man in the South. It's now international geopolitics. And the quote I was hoping we get to, but I'll just read it verbatim, was from Pierre Poilievre, which was, quote, "So now Liberals say you can't afford a home because of the war in Iran. How much land, lumber, drywall, concrete do we import from Iran? Zero. But rest assured that all the other Liberal disasters will now be blamed on totally unrelated foreign conflicts." End quote. Your thoughts, my friend?
I'll go back to what I said. I think I put a video about this last night, and that's the fact of the nature. It is fascinating that the constant shifting of the goalposts. If it's not Iran, it's Donald Trump. If it's not Donald Trump, it's climate change. If it's not climate change, it's not racism. Guess what? It all roads back go to Stephen Harper, baby. It's always somebody with this party, and that's always the excuse. And I think Jacob Mantle put it perfectly. It was like, it's always something at this present time, except for what they are currently doing, and they do it because, well, that's politics, baby. It's always a deflection and redirection, and for the most part, it does work on some people. That's why they keep doing it. But it gets to a point where it gets so egregious, which this one was. And if you look at Robertson when he first said it, you can blame the heckling, but he knows, you can see in his facial expressions, he realized, oh, that was a stupid thing to say. Why did I say that? And he had to compose himself. He could use the excuse of the heckling, but it was a reality of like, oh man, even that's a stretch for me. It was wild to watch.
No, 100%. And, you know, again, I go back to what I was saying earlier, guys, about Carney saying, judge me by affordability. In the almost year since the election was won, I just see things where, and forget about the gas going up to almost $2 a liter in some markets. I think that's temporary, and that is because of the war in Iran. But I go to a grocery store, I fill up a basket, not a cart, a basket, and I go, that's about $25, and I go to the till, $98.74. Sir, I would be the worst contestant on The Price is Right. I've lost track of what things cost. And that leads us to Yet more bad economic news. Let's see Mark Carney reacting to Canada. Oh, ho hum, we just lost another 84,000 jobs in the month of February of this year. Unbelievable. Check it out.
If you look at the performance of the labor market over the course of the last 6 months, we've created over 80,000 jobs net over the last 6 months. The United States has created 6,000 jobs. Okay, the United States, 11 times the size of our economy. Wages are growing at 4.2%, fastest wage growth in years. Unemployment, 6.7%, is lower than the peak the level when I came into office a year ago. There's no question, though, because it goes to the first part of your question. Now I'll move to that, which is that given the scale of the trade actions, the uncertainty that is associated as well as with the trade actions by the United States, that is causing big adjustments in the Canadian economy. And that's why we're making major investments across a whole range of areas. I won't go through them all. I think you're probably familiar with them.
Oh my God, Drea, the last time I saw that much spin, it was my Westinghouse dryer in overtime. Let's really talk about what he didn't say. Those jobs were not part-time jobs. They were full-time jobs. They were private sector jobs, not public sector jobs. And typically, when you crunch the stats, they were younger males, definitely lower in age than the baby boomers. Of course, the baby boomers, they seem, to be, doesn't care, doesn't affect me. I'm retired and I've got a nice pension and my house is paid off, which I think is the only thing that makes sense if you believe the polls, why the Carney Liberals are allegedly just crushing it. I hope that data is wrong. But I'm not buying what Carney is saying there, Dre, and I think we need to fact check him that there was only 6,000 new jobs created in the U.S. That doesn't sound right.
Yeah, that I was like, really, only 6,000? We definitely need to fact check. Maybe that's like 6,000 jobs in one particular industry or something. But not only questioning that, we need to point out that this 84,000 loss of jobs is just in the month of February, if I'm reading that correct, which is astonishing. So yeah, a lot of deflection there, but we should be fact checking everything. We just need a page where we fact check, and that would keep us very busy. We'd probably have to hire a new journalist just for that.
We should do it, actually. Maybe we can hire an intern. But Josh, I mean, I don't know about you. This is strictly anecdotal, but every odd time I find myself in a shopping mall and I walk by stores, even stores I'd have no intention to patronize. And I'm going back to last time, it was just before Christmas when you'd think it was busy. And they're dead zones. There are no, there's congregations of people at the food court having a bite to eat and everything, but empty stores, that is those stores that are still in business and not boarded up. Why is Mark Carney reacting to horrible economic news by pretending it's actually not so horrible? In fact, it's good news.
Well, it's because he has very few hands to play when these types of numbers come out. You listen. One habit I like to get into with Mark Carney is I know it's so easy for us as conservatives in general just to kind of write him off. That's actually to our detriment. We have to listen very carefully to what he's saying. When he says 6 months, there's a reason why he used that time frame. It was because that's when we had that random boost of part-time jobs in September. That's the stat he's citing here. And so he's trying to stuff all these artificially created part-time jobs into this larger figure, saying, it's not that bad. But then you actually parse out, since the seasonal time to hire part-time, which would have been mainly retail jobs at that present time, if you look at the breakdown of those numbers at the time, we've lost jobs in January, we're losing jobs in February, and the guarantee it will be lost jobs in March as well. That's what you have to look at. And he'll extend that again. When the poor jobs number comes out next month, it'll be like, 7 months ago, he will use this to try and infuse and artificially inflate these numbers. And that's all he has at this moment. And it's like a matter of time, especially as we're going into these by-elections and he's about this much closer to his majority. it's getting to that point where, oh shoot, enough of this bad news comes out, especially since the BMO came out and said this is horrendous. CIBC came out today saying, oh, this is terrible. Well, we look at the prime minister, he says, well, maybe not that bad, but every other bank is saying, this sucks.
And you know, Josh, and also the Privy Council from last year. Do you remember that report? 2040, which is but 14 years away. That's really a blink of an eyelash. Canada is going to be a failed dystopian state. The rich are in gated communities or they've already fled. The rest of us are illegally fishing, hunting, foraging just for the bare necessities. And this is not, some out there. This is the Privy Council. So with all the current bad economic years, with the long-term projection looking so dire, how are the Carney Liberals seemingly doing so well in the polls? I don't get it.
That was a question I was asking literally in the election when I was going up to Liberal supporters and asking them, what is it about Canada that's making you want to support Mark Carney? And they're like, we need change. And I'm like, well, then why would the Liberals be the change? And I'm pointing out that their own, the Privy Council is predicting our young people are going to leave. Nobody's going to be around to take care of the old people. I shouldn't have said old, elderly people, but I guess they'll have made for that. And they're predicting that even under their own leadership, which they're hopeful of winning, that it's going to be horrible. So,
that is an amazing response you got, Drea. Because most of these Liberals are the same retreads from the last 10 years. And Mark Carney, the new head of the snake, he was advising Justin Trudeau for the last 5 years of his term. So so much for change. But Drea, staying with you because it's in your neck of the woods, the BC land grab, the idea of some Native groups and politicians implying that, that house you spent 30 years paying off, well, might not be yours, might belong to a tribe. Evidently, we have a Liberal MP poo-pooing that. Oh, don't worry, it's just misinformation. Don't worry about that. Everything's going to be fine. Let's see what she has to say, and I'm going to ask the two of you, are you buying what she's selling?
So most of the First Nation field doesn't come with private property. Why is that?
Because it's provincial authority. And so the Musqueam deal is bilateral between the federal government and Musqueam. And so it's not about private property rights. It's about sitting down, continuing discussions. The other thing I would note is the other two agreements is the fisheries and the marine stewardship. So that opportunity to sit down as decision makers at the table.
Do you understand how people are concerned after the Coquitlam deal? There's a lot of buzz in BC about this, and
there's a lot of misinformation, fear-mongering from bad actors, but at the end of the day, it's a bilateral agreement between Musqueam and the federal government.
And what does it mean that the government has a responsibility to communicate more clearly then, given that there is so much misinformation going on here?
Yes, and we are continuing to communicate, and so more information we'll be putting out, plain language to make sure people understand what these agreements are versus title agreements versus modern treaties. So,
Drea, I got to tell you, if I was forced at gunpoint, you have to leave Ontario. You have to go to a different province or territory. I'm going to be honest. BC is dead last on the list. This uncertainty, despite her reassurances to the contrary, and I know it'll eventually probably go to a Supreme Court challenge, and that doesn't exactly make me overconfident there, but what is the market like for real estate in BC, especially those municipalities that are affected by these land grabs?
We are in absolute trouble. And the first piece of misinformation I want to address is the fact that she is trying to give Canadians, British Columbians in particular, some sort of certainty that this does not have anything to do with private property rights. And according to the Aboriginal law expert that I recently interviewed, and it would seem this would make perfect sense, she can't promise that because the agreement between the Liberal government and the Musqueam ban does not exclude private property rights. It establishes Aboriginal title over Vancouver and other parts of other cities like Burnaby, Coquitlam, I believe some of Surrey as well. And it does not say this excludes private property rights. So that alone means we don't know exactly what this means and what it could mean down the road. So she is the one spreading misinformation. And how rudely so. These are people who have seen what just happened with the Cowichan versus Canada agreement, where in fact fee simple title is superseded by Aboriginal title. And she's just disregarding, almost trying to make people think like they're crazy for being concerned about this. And let's not forget that even if Aboriginal title doesn't mean, I suppose they own your land, does it mean there's going to be another tax? Does it mean you're going to be able to get loans? Does it mean you're going to be able to sell? What about your equity? That's something we've seen before, where the Musqueam ban had a land dispute with some of the people who lived on their lease land. Well, while that was all happening, those families, many of them lost their homes, but they lost the equity in their home. When you talk about when you're older and you're retiring and all of these things, that is what's at stake here. So much. We already have stories of people not being able to sell homes as much anymore. We're hearing about even businesses. This is more in the Richmond, of course, not getting the loans that they would have gotten loans. So we're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and Drea, I would say, what is the value of a promise from a Liberal MP these days? Well, I think the answer rhymes with the word hero. But Josh, tell me, in the big picture, this is a growing trend. We see this creeping into other jurisdictions. I think it's aided and abetted by these ludicrous land acknowledgements where basically politicians and all kinds of other institutions are saying, yeah, you know what, we're on this land, we're on this unceded territory, et cetera, et cetera. Where I'm going with this, if this becomes a thing in the months and years ahead in our Dominion, the whole Truth and Reconciliation Initiative is going to be set back 160 years. If you're going to have Canadians who have, through blood, sweat, and tears, spent 40 years paying off their mortgage, only to be told by somebody in government, sorry, chief, you're going to have to give up your house to this native group, I can see things getting really ugly very fast. We have to put a nip in the bud of this as soon as possible.
For sure. And I think what goes through my mind is what Dre was hitting on, and what I've kind of gathered as I've kind of been trying to put pieces of all this together, is just, it's more so just the ambiguity that's really upsetting people and just really adding that to that uncertainty. And the more I watch this and try to see this kind of transpire, it really hits me as I feel like this is going to be our Hawaii. And what I mean by that is those fires that took place in Hawaii that took out tremendous amounts of land, and all of a sudden people are showing up giving people pennies on the dollar for their property and taking it, and all of a sudden those things are being redeveloped. I feel like that's what may be a version of what we see here. We're going to see people end up having to maybe potentially surrender their land because they end up being rendered useless. Then all of a sudden you're going to see private companies come in, say, buy it all up, and then they'll railroad the Indian Act as governments have done in the past, and be like, oh, oops, this is what we could have done the whole time. And that's where I see this could go. I hope it doesn't. I don't want to be fear-mongering, but if I'm watching and seeing how the map plays out, that's the piece that scares me the most. Is this seems like more of a private industry move than anything else, and then they're just trying to pit groups against each other in the process.
Josh, that is absolutely fascinating. I never even thought of that. You mentioned Hawaii. We see this happening in Pacific Palisades in California too, right? Where that community is never going to be restored as it once was. How do we fight back though? Because like I said, Native claims, when they go to courts, the courts are very generous in terms of accommodating demands. Any prediction, regardless of who's behind this land grab, in terms of how this may play out?
I'll let you go for it, Drea. Or sorry, was that directed at me?
Oh, either or. Drea, how about you first? And then Josh, while you think about it, because I think, believe it or not, we're at the halfway mark and we're going to have to bid adieu to you. But Drea, from your sources in British Columbia, what's the talk? What's the scuttlebutt in terms of, restoring sanity to the housing market?
Well, this is the biggest issue. I mean, Kamloops has Aboriginal title claim over the entire city and also the Sun Peaks area, and that includes private land. So we're sitting here trying to wonder, what does this mean? And remember, these decisions were happening behind the homeowners' backs, behind British Columbians' backs. Even with what MP Alty is talking about here, oh, we're going to make these agreements something people can understand. Well, you should have done that before. In fact, people should have even known ahead of time you were even discussing this. Premier David Eby claims he was at the signing ceremony but knew nothing. He's literally sitting front row. So as much as I don't want to be a fearmonger as well, I feel like I'm just telling people the reality that nothing is secure. We do not know, and people need to take this matter seriously, because the truth is, we don't even understand how many other deals have been happening. They buried this under a fisheries agreement, and the way she says, oh, the other two agreements were fishery. Yeah, you mean recreation? The recreational fishing industry? Is that what you mean? Sport fishing? You mean all the waterways? You're giving a band that governs only 1,400 people that much power, that much authority, and 95% of the British Columbians that it affects cannot vote this band in power or take them out of power. This is insanity. And when it comes to housing in British Columbia, we were already capped, and now we're dealing with this.
Wow. Josh, final word goes to you. To Drea's point, David Eby, the premier, saying, I know nothing, kind of like a caricature of Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. Whether he's telling the truth or not, given that he is the premier, the question arises, why are you the premier if you know nothing on such an important issue?
Well, I think that it comes back to just the how our politicians generally play the I'm stupid card, typically. And we all know very well, we've seen David Eby. We know that David Eby had known about the Chinese triad groups. We knew what was going on with housing, how it was exploding, and the way it was being manipulated by the United Front Work Department. We are now seeing Chinese groups actually take advantage of the situation that's happening with Aboriginal title and going in and buying up and doing deals with Indigenous groups to shield themselves away from persecution from the Canadian government and dealing with them. So this is how this all typically goes. And I go back to your first question there about how do we speak against this. It's time to stop playing defense. It's time to start playing offense. It's time to start being loud and letting people know, and do not get discouraged. As long as you are honest, you are true, and you're not trying to be a jerk and be hateful, you need to speak out on this. Don't worry about them calling you racist or a bigot and crazy for bringing this up. You keep pressing forward. You keep bringing up the issues. You keep talking about the facts of why this is an issue, and do not let them deter you for one single solitary second.
100%. Well said, Josh. Josh, we have to say goodbye to you, but before we do, my friend, can you tell our viewers where they can find your work online?
For sure. We are the Elevate Report. We are on YouTube. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, what have you. We post twice a day. We have a live stream every morning, as well as a video on demand in the afternoons. And so we always love to check it out. And you can check us out at these other platforms as well. I love seeing you.
And for those who haven't been to the Elevate Report, Josh, what is your bailiwick?
Sorry, say it again.
Oh, what topics do you tend to cover on the Elevate Report?
My fault. Yeah, we're covering Canadian politics.
Bailiwick.
Yeah.
Sorry. Tell us your bailiwick again, please.
Listen, I went to journalism school, and every once in a while I'm going to pull out a $3 word, okay, to make me kind of look smarter than I actually am. But anyways, so Josh, what do you talk about there?
We're talking about Canadian politics every day. Anything that regards that impacts us here at home, whether it be their geopolitics that affect us here or whatever is happening in different provinces, we will be covering it on a daily basis to making sure that you stay up to date.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure having you on board, and thank you for your insight. And folks, Drea and I will be back after these ads. See you on the other side.
Budget 2026 is focused on what matters, including record investments in healthcare, with a strong focus on supporting more doctors and nurse practitioners and providing the services patients rely on most, including an additional 50,000 surgeries. We're also adding much-needed acute care capacity to our hospitals and emergency departments. Budget 2026. Focused on what matters.
Gun bans make great distraction.
Trudeau may be gone, but Carney has picked up his same rhetoric.
We will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of
Hunters, collectors, competitors, and defenders of tradition are still being targeted, while criminals run wild under Liberal policy. But we are fighting back. Join us, Canada's National Firearms Association, in defense of freedom.
Canadians know the national anthem. They stand in silence to remember those who died for this country. But not every Canadian knows their rights and freedoms. The Freedom Passport will change that. It looks and feels like a Canadian passport, but contains the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in a portable, easy-to-read format. The Freedom Passport. Order one for yourself and for all the freedom lovers that you love at freedompassport.ca.
All right, Andrea, I believe you have an ad read.
That is right. Thank you to our friends who help keep us alive. And we only read you ads that we think you will enjoy. And this one, I personally think I need to get. So this is the Rumble Wallet. They can freeze your accounts, shut off your cards, lock you out of your own money overnight. Banks don't protect you, they control you. That's why real financial freedom starts with ownership. Introducing Rumble Wallet, a non-custodial wallet built for people who refuse to give up control. With Rumble Wallet, you don't just buy digital currency like Bitcoin and Tether. You can own Tether, gold, real gold, on the blockchain through Tether Gold. You get direct ownership of physical gold bars, each one fully allocated, verifiable by serial number, purity, and weight. This isn't paper gold. This isn't an IOU. This is real gold without bank vaults, storage fees, or gatekeepers. You can buy, sell, or move it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when traditional gold markets are closed. And if you want, Tether Gold can be redeemed for physical gold. That's power. And when you support creators on Rumble, you can tip them directly using Rumble Wallet, peer-to-peer, and outside the banking system. No permissions, no middleman, no cancel button. This wallet is yours forever. I think that sounds pretty cool once I can afford it.
And I'm sure it sounds really cool to all those Canadians who 4 years ago had their bank accounts frozen by Fraulein Freeland. That would not happen with this product, folks. So there's a built-in demographic for potential buyers if ever I've seen one, Drea. Moving on, well, tomorrow, folks, unfortunately, in Toronto and other cities, I know Montreal, although interestingly in London, the big London in the UK, they've canceled it, did the right thing. It's the Al-Quds Day, and Al-Quds Day, that was founded in 1979 by the original Ayatollah Khomeini, and it is really an anti-Jew, anti-Israel hate fest, and incredibly, in the context of the last few days in Toronto, where we have seen 2 synagogues shot up, a boxing club operated by an Iranian activist who's all about regime change, the U.S. consulate where these people are going to congregate shot up in the wee hours of the morning. No, that's okay. We're still going to let this happen. Let's go to Toronto Police Superintendent Stephen Prentice, who's going to tell us about how this time we're really, really, really going to get it right when it comes to monitoring hate crimes.
Hate speech specifically is extremely complex. It requires a lot of evidence. It requires evidence that not only includes what is said, what is shown, any banners. It includes the context of the protest under which that was shown, and that just does. Those are not easy issues to resolve in the moment. But certainly, like Superintendent Young had said earlier, even if we don't take that action in the moment because we need time to reflect and consult with the Crowns, sometimes it's more than one consult to really understand and collect all that evidence. Then we'll come back and certainly lay those charges after the fact.
Oh, I see, Dre. It's extremely complex. How complex is it? And this happens every Sunday at the corner of Bathurst and Shepherd, which is a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, when people gather and they openly chant for the death of the Jewish people. They display swastikas. They cosplay as the October 7th terrorist Sinwar. Some of them even carry around fake hand grenades. Oh, you know what? Nothing to see here. This is despicable. And I'll tell you this, Drea, if tomorrow was about 2,000 hooded Klansmen marching in the streets of Toronto, do you think the Premier, the Mayor, the police chief, even the Prime Minister would say, not on our watch, because I don't see any difference whatsoever? Why the double standard?
I have no clue what the double standard is, but what stands out to me from covering both types of protests out here in the Lower Mainland is, you're right, the difference of what is being in people's hands, what is being chanted. When you look at, for example, covering the Iranian protests, it's more about just totally focusing on freedom rather than attacking someone else and giving thanks to, as we've seen more recently, Trump and Netanyahu. And then you're right, in the others, it's like death to Canada, death to Israel, grenades here from the river to the sea. What does that mean? It's a literal call for genocide. So the double standard, we see this all the time. We see this, how dare you say that there's only two genders out here in our BC Human Rights Tribunal. I mean, that's like the hate of all hates. But again, this is in the same province where they were burning the Canadian flag and calling for death to our country. So the double standard is there. On the one hand, for sure, we do want hate speech laws to be sort of a narrow scope, but it needs to not be one law for thee and one law for me.
And that's exactly what it is. Andrea, we're free speech absolutists, I think, here at Rebel News, but there is a line. And the line, and I've been completely consistent on this, when you, advocate harm or death to an individual or an identifiable group of individuals, that's over the line, right? That cannot be tolerated. And under, I think it's section 319 of the Criminal Code, it's all there in black and white. So when Prentice is saying extremely complex, not so much. But how about this for the double standard? There's going to be an enormous amount of police out there tomorrow, maybe $1-2 million worth of policing resources. Drea, I just covered earlier this month the trial of Adam Skelly. Well, it was a constitutional challenge. He's the barbecue restaurateur that was shut down in the city of Toronto. He was put into bankruptcy. You know what the amazing thing is? He still has an invoice on his desk from the city of Toronto to pay for $187,000 of policing costs.
Wow.
Okay. I believe 2024 alone, thanks to the Hamassols doing all their shenanigans every week, the policing tab was something like 19 million. Why is it Adam Skelly, a guy who was just trying to make a living selling barbecue to people who wanted to buy it, gets an invoice like that? And these people who are all about hate and chanting for genocide, oh, well, what are you going to do? It's extremely complex. I don't get it. I don't get this issue either, Drea.
I don't get it. And will the police also be bringing donuts and coffee as well? Is that how they're going to get it right this time? No, that's shocking to know that, Adam Skelly has to pay that much. And I just remember the amount of force that came out was ridiculous as well for someone who was just trying to barbecue. They had the horses and everything out. It was just a ridiculous scene. But you're right. This has been a very costly 2-year-long protest, if you will, and the amount of money going towards it. But again, on the flip side, we support protesting too. So as long as it's protesting.
Again, Drea, there is a line. I mean, we see Jewish businesses and restaurants getting vandalized, paint bombed. Mm-hmm. We see these people go into the Eaton Center, trespassing, even giving death threats to cops. And we turn a blind eye and look another way. This is just way too much what I would call unreasonable accommodation. And in the Department of Plenty of Blame to go along, in 2018, Doug Ford said when he becomes premier, this garbage called Al-Quds Day, it's over. It's certainly not going to have a home on the lawns of Queen's Park. And now, well, it's a little nuanced. It's a little more complicated than that. What the hell is Premier Ford smoking, Drea?
I don't know, something from his brother. I don't know.
Well,
but
you know what? I loved his dearly departed brother. Yes, he had his personal demons.
Yeah.
But Rob Ford is not Doug Ford. Rob Ford would not sign on to this. Doug Ford is a disgrace. Tell me, in Vancouver, I don't know the lay of the land there, are the usual suspects coming out for Al-Quds Day?
You know what? I have to look into it. I wouldn't be surprised, but I've noticed, I don't know if it's a decline or an overshadowing as soon as, again, the Iranians have come out and their fight. It's kind of like what happened to that movement that used to be there for the last 2 years. So they might not be coming out for that, but I certainly will double check. And when you talk about some of the things that have been happening in Ontario, I think about how hard, again, the whole freedom community was treated for protesting peacefully. And they were not the only groups protesting, but they were the only groups getting arrested for protesting. And when you look at the pro-Palestine movement, again, in Vancouver, I already mentioned some of the horrific things that they've gotten away with. But even one protester was gouged a female police officer's eyes out. And you're right, it's about them not cracking down. That's what's emboldening them to do this. At one point, at one of our protests, or the protests out here in the Lower Mainland, they were handing out pamphlets on how to get into buildings without being noticed. Well, what on earth is that? And so that's why One BC leader Dallas Brody has filed her own personal prosecution against what has been declared a terrorist entity, the Samadone group. That's who was leading a lot of our protests out there, and nothing's even happened. They've arrested Charlotte Cates for that, but they haven't prosecuted her. So it's all this joke. So there's anybody who's a radical and extremist in these groups is emboldened to keep doing it, to keep teaching others, because why wouldn't you? You're getting away with it.
No, 100%. And to your original point, Drea, contrasting this with the Freedom Convoy, what member of the Hamas contingent has been arrested and put in solitary confinement for about 50 days like Tamara Leach was? Which one of these ingrates has had their bank accounts frozen as hundreds of Canadians did when they donated to the Freedom Convoy 4 years ago? I mean, as the old cliche goes, if there was no double standard, there'd be no standards at all. But folks, I can tell you it's going to kick off tomorrow at the U.S. consulate. And by the way, I wonder how happy Donald Trump is to hear about that, since just mere days ago, this consulate was shot up. And Rebel News will be there. We will have 3 teams covering all the shenanigans. And I guess the question arises, Drea, are the cops, because there's all this bluster, we're not going to tolerate anyone crossing the line, or are they, as you said earlier, going to bring coffee and Timbits to the Hamas holes and arrest peaceful counter demonstrators and members of the independent press? And yes, I speak from bitter experience.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I notice is when we go out there to cover the story and we're told you can't go anywhere near these people, it's like, well, how is that a protest? How can journalists not even walk up and get a good shot? If they're that dangerous, that's a problem. And they tend to push back on the peaceful or, just doing your job journalists and say, hey, you guys need to stay over there. And it's like, no, we're the news. We're supposed to show what's happening. If you've got one side in particular where it's not even safe for me to go and practice journalism, we've got a real issue there.
Well said. One of the constant refrains I'll hear from the cops is go back to your area, and that's treating us like we're the counter demonstrators. No, we're not. We're the umpires. We're the media. We want to get both sides of the story. And I think our beloved boss man, Ezra Levant, he had the greatest comment when he was told, go back to your area or go back to your zone. And Ezra said, this, meaning the Dominion of Canada, is my zone. This is public
Exactly.
property, in the city of Toronto, in the province of Ontario, in the Dominion of Canada. And if only the police acted that way. And also, Drea, this whole mantra, well, you know what? We got to keep the peace. So that's why we'll arrest counter demonstrators and independent media types. Because you see, your mere presence incites the hooligans. Well, that's their problem. If it incites them to violence, then arrest them. You know what reminds me of, Drea? The dark old days of rape, when you would have the female victim on the stand and she would get questions like, how much cleavage were you showing that night, honey? How much leg were you displaying? Like, she was the catalyst for getting sexually assaulted. That's what it seems like to me, going back to the dark old days of how we used to prosecute sexual assault cases.
Same thing we're seeing with the trans violence, the trans shooters and non-binary shooters. What is the mainstream media doing? Going, oh, well, the first victim was this person. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's shocking. Anyways, we'll see what happens. And I hope nothing happens. I hope on Monday we're not analyzing, gosh, what went wrong again. But in light of all the violence from these people to Iranian boxing clubs, Jewish synagogues, the U.S. consulate, it is a complete dereliction of duty that Mayor Chow has not ordered the police to say, this is canceled. If they can do that in London, England, they can do it here. But we're gutless, and it's shameful. Drea, we're rapidly running out of time. How about, because this one, I love this exclusive here, how Pierre Poilievre is saying the law is clear on deportation of Jaskirat Singh Sidhu. He's the truck driver, folks, who blew through that stop sign and killed 16 people involved with the Humboldt Broncos team. More victims, of course, those who are confined to wheelchairs for the rest of their lives. I want to see this guy deported. Is the Concorde still in operation? Can we get that out of the hangar? I want him back in India as fast as possible. And I think the disgrace of this case, Drea, is how the mainstream media is making this guy, the truck driver, the murderer, seem to be the victim, not the young lives that he wiped out and those he has injured for life. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't followed this closely before. When it first happened, I followed closely. And if I recall, he was very, he did seem to, of course, feel horrible and be like, I'll take whatever punishment comes for me. So that's great, but you still got to go. At the end of the day, you still got to get out. We have to have law and order here. We have to point out how serious of a tragedy this was, whether it was an accident or not. And we cannot waver on stuff like this. This was 16 kids. He's got to go. We got to deport him. And that is what it is.
Drea, and I'm sure if we had a national referendum, it would be a landslide. Get packing. I want to ask you, what is the agenda of so many in the mainstream media in terms of, whether it's video or print coverage, and they're talking about how, he's tearing up and holding back tears and blah, 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 blah. If you went to so many of the survivors of that horrific crash, you'd get tons of tears too, and rightfully so, right? What is the agenda of the mainstream media in this case, depicting this guy as a victim in the first place?
It's the same agenda we see when someone does horrific crime and they're an adult, they're not an adolescent, and we're blurring their face. You don't even know what race they are. And then, of course, when they're white, it's like, oh, look at this white guy. And it's never mental illness when it's the white guy either. It's just automatically, a rage incident. So we see this all the time. It's to fit in with the narrative. That's what the mainstream media does. No longer is it this neutral source of news. It is always pushing an agenda and misleading the public into thinking that it's neutral. So they do these seemingly slight things, focusing on the abuser. Again, we saw that with the Tumbler Ridge shooter. We saw them really sympathizing to the point that City News actually AI edited, I don't know what the right term is, but literally edited the shooter to make them look more feminine because they don't pass well as a woman, or as a young woman, I should say. So, I mean, that's the state of the media.
You know what? I think you've raised excellent points. What we see with the media, they have a race-based lens and a trans lens. So with Sidhu, I think if he looked like me and was wearing a red MAGA cap, there'd be zero sympathy, not a chance.
Sure.
And if that man posing as a woman was not so-called transgender, yeah, they wouldn't go out of their way doing gymnastics in terms of getting the pronouns right. And you know, Drea, even from the get-go, we're blaming the media, but law enforcement too. When we saw the RCMP, I'll never forget this. When they released a statement, the shooter was a woman wearing a dress. Why would they go out of their way to say dress? Who cares if it's a dress, a pantsuit, a swimsuit? But they were, again, doubling down on, you see how female he is? He was wearing a dress. It's a she, obviously.
It was horrible. And that was also a dead giveaway when I saw it. I was like, what woman's going to shoot anybody with a dress on? Like, it's obviously a guy. But yeah,
I never
right.
thought
like,
of that.
That was literally when I heard dress, I was like, it's a guy. Like, it's just the fact that they're saying it and that a woman just would wear pants. And then also we know the stats that they are also now fudging. They're making it look like women are more violent than we are, even by putting them into women's prisons. That's affecting the women's stats. And I think it's over, I want to say around 80% of trans identifying, males that get into women's prison is for violent or sexual crimes. And now it looks like that's us doing that.
Another thing to thank Justin Trudeau on, because it was under his watch after being given a question from some transgender that he changed the prison policy. And I totally agree with you, Dre. I've covered those demonstrations outside the female penitentiary in Kitchener, Ontario. You put a man in there and 80% of them plus are for some form of sexual assault. You've just put the fox into the hen house. And I was speaking to some ex-female prisoners. If you dare misgender in a prisoner there, i.e. a man pretending to be a woman, you will be punished. And it ranges from having your dessert taken away that day to a day in solitary. Can you believe this madness?
That is absolutely sick, and I absolutely believe it, unfortunately. So leave it to you and me when we're together to, even if it wasn't on the agenda, tackle this very important issue, right? We're going to get there.
It's all interrelated, isn't it?
Yes,
when it comes to identity politics, unfortunately. Drea, we're rapidly running out of time, so why don't we do the Daily Cringe and the Daily Delight? Guess which political leader federally is the Daily Cringe, and guess which one is the Daily Delight? Let's roll the cringe first.
Question is, Minister, is injecting fentanyl safe? Yes or no?
Je dirais que les centres de consommation supervisés.
I would say that the supervised consumption sites save lives. They save lives. I know, but these I have seen these sites myself in Vancouver. I saw the ambulances come.
Injecting fentanyl, was that safe? Was injecting fentanyl safe?
Injection de fentanyl particulièrement. Je n'ai pas assisté à ce genre
d'injection. Thank you very much, Ms. Chief. Question is.
He should have followed up by saying, is jumping off 1,000-foot precipice without a parachute safe? Is there some wiggle room there? Drea, that's crazy.
Well, if you look at the stats, what's happening is, yes, a safe injection site is saving lives, but the exact same people are going overdosing. She mentioned the ambulance are coming. It's not addressing the problem, and it's not correlated. It is correlated with more crime in the area, which is obviously not safe, and it's not correlated with less overdoses overall in the community. So in fact, it's correlated with more.
Yes.
So Yeah, I mean, she's just dancing around it. At least they got an answer, unlike when Ezra Levant questioned her about the ostrich situation, and she just stared at him and blinked very awkwardly.
You'd get a better interview from an ostrich than her at that one. I remember that,
Absolutely.
But, I was having deja vu, Dre. It's almost like when Justice Brown of the U.S. Supreme Court was asked to define what a woman is, and she could not, because she's not... Was it a doctor, a biologist? And she herself is a woman, but never mind. Let's end on a positive note, shall we? The Daily Delight.
We have a couple of chats. Should I read those before we get to the
Absolutely. Let's read the...
okay.
Yes.
All right. So Memory Hole donates $5. Thank you very much. Says, not sure it's the bailiwick of the police to shut down the Islamo-Nazis. I don't know if I could say that, but I did. But rather, it's the peer view of the slimeball politicians who depend on the Jew haters' votes.
100%. And I'll go back to Doug Ford on this file. And by the way, Memory Hole, thank you very much for that donation. He went from saying we're going to ban this to last year when the issue came up at Queen's Park of people wearing the keffiyeh, and the speaker rightfully said, you can't wear that in here. It's a political statement, which it is. Doug Ford going to bat for the keffiyeh wearers because there was a by-election in a riding that had a substantial Muslim demographic.
Yeah.
What a complete sellout. What a fake conservative he is. Anyways, there you go.
JP Alberta First donates $20. Thank you very much. Says, as for the Humboldt deportation, not happening. Too many boxes checked. His skin color, hockey player skin color, Western province. He has new wife. He has child now. He said sorry.
You know what? Perfect analysis. Andrea, it's like I've always said, it used to be, remember the iconic image of Lady Justice? The sword in one hand, the scale in the other, and a blindfold, meaning justice is blind. It's just the facts that are going to determine innocence or guilt. Now, Lady Justice in this country, she's wearing X-ray glasses.
Jeez, yeah.
Anyways, and let's make bailiwick a great word again.
I know, yeah. See, you taught me. I'm just a citizen journalist over here learning what bailiwick means, so.
Okay, and here's something funny. It's Mr. Polyev talking wine. Here, what did he have to say?
I'll be offering a drink to the journalists depending on the quality of their journalism today. So the headlines will dictate whether you get any of this beautiful Canadian wine or gin. As for me, my staff has told me I'm not allowed to drink any of this until after question period. They are no fun at all.
Drea, are you a wine drinker, my friend?
I am, not often, but yeah, I have a glass of wine with a nice red steak.
Because there's...
How about you?
Well, you know what? I know nothing about wine, but I once met a wine connoisseur, and he told me it's a wine called Peller Estates, a Baco Noir. He said for the value you get, and which I think it's less than $15, but the quality you receive, it is off the charts. He's so right. I'm going to give that plug. An Ontario wine, I know they have great vintages in BC that way. So there's one way, in a tangible way, that we can support Canada, buying domestic wines. Even though I think Mark Carney, his vacation is in Europe, he can't be bothered sticking around.
Yeah, and we got to stop those inner province tariffs that nobody really talks about that are happening within our own country when it comes to wine, and making, in British Columbia, our wineries outsource their wine to the U.S. despite the tariff war, because it's more expensive to send it to Ontario.
It is a scandal. Andrea, this has been spoken about since the 80s, as far as I can remember. Let's tear down the interprovincial trade barriers, and they're still up there. And I thought, because of the Fortress Canada mentality, we were going to tear them down, but oh well, another hollow province from the elbows up crowd. Drea, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Thank you to everybody that tuned in, especially those who made those generous donations. I shall be back on Monday with the sensational Sheila Gunn Reid. In the meantime, folks, have a wonderful weekend and stay safe and stay sane.
Today, we got the terrible news that 84,000 Canadians lost their jobs last month, a devastating jobs report, the result of in part of Mark Carney's Liberal failures and continued job-killing Liberal policies that have made our economy the weakest in the G7. We are saddened to see that Canada is in the weakest position after a year of Mark Carney, because it is true, we do have global problems, and we cannot discount or try to control what President Trump does. But all the countries are facing those tariffs. None of them have a shrinking economy like we do under Mark Carney here in Canada.